Welcome as we continue walking down East Hampton's wonderful Main Street, examining some of the buildings and some of the stories behind them. Today we're going to look at the Edwards Theater, keeping in mind that theaters played a really important role in the beginning of the summer colony out here. Certainly not the early beginning, but by 1890s or so, many of the summer visitors would be very familiar with silent movies, and they would certainly expect that they could see some in the evenings rather than sitting around and talking to all the relatives who were hanging around the dining room table. And we also know that even in the wintertime and before the summer colonists, we had Nickelodeons in the community. We also know that at Clinton Academy, which is where we are today, that there was a large theater that was built in the 1880s, and in that theater they also showed some silent movies, but they also showed magic lantern shows where they would bring someone from New London, Connecticut or New York who would come out with a magic lantern that was often fueled by kerosene and would show images which were beyond silent. They were stills. Sometimes they were postcards, sometimes they were painted glass slides that had some automated parts of them. So there were many ways to enjoy what is going to become an important film time here before the creation of a real theater built just for watching such things. We know that there were, by at least 1905, Nickelodeons on Main Street, mostly up on the second floor above storefronts. And those were mostly folding chairs with upright piano, and a couple local people played the piano and were very apt at making the sound of horses' hooves and things of that nature, and having some funny running movies sounds like you'd expect with the Keystone Cops. And there was one person in the community who thought that, we could really do a lot better than a Nickelodeon on folding chairs. And that was Leroy, or Roy Edwards, who bought out Cleves and Strong's Theater, which had been opened in about 1913. He bought that in 1915, realized that it was going to be a cash cow for a while, and in 1926 bought and built a brand new theater on the east side of Main Street. It opened on August 30th. The theater organ had not been installed yet, so he hired an orchestra to play for the first few weeks. When the theater organ came, the organist had choices of the most extraordinary sounds. There were 4 or 5 different whistles for trains, there were bells, there were clapping thunder, there was the sound of rain falling, and all things that would have been necessary to accentuate what was going on the silent screen. And so, in other words, you didn't always have to read the subtitles. You could just listen to the sound of the music from the organ and pretty much tell what's going to happen or what's happening on the screen. When the theater was built, it had over 1,000 seats. There's a question as to how many, but 1,035 seems to be the number that sticks. It had 2 smoking lounges. The facade was Tudorish with half-timbered effects. And the interior was hung with tapestries and chandeliers, one critic said, befitting the taste of Henry VIII. In 1951, the theater was refigured and there were 825 seats in it. By the 1960s, we had 2 cinemas in the community. Someone opened an art theater, which in those days meant European films, some of them a little more racy than some of the approved moralistic ones that were across the street at the Edwards Theater. And that only lasted for about 4 years. It was up on the second floor of number 1 Main Street, a building that originally was the post office, and also I think on the second floor was where the telephone company was for a while. It's now Eli Tahari, and that theater was called the Post Office Theater, but it closed within about 4 years. And on April 14, 1964, a blazing fire opened and found the interior of the Edwards Theater and completely destroyed it. Only the exterior facade survived. And very soon, East Hampton Cinema 6 took over the site, cleared it, and built a new theater. And what I've always found interesting is that the current theater, of course, which has been closed due to COVID-19, that when you sat down to see a film, there was always the credits telling you, United Artists, Regal Theater. But before that, it said Edwards Theater. And I thought that that was a really nice bow to the history of a cinema that was here for so many years, that the new one in a new building, but on the same location, would honor the Edwards name and say Edwards Regal United Artists Theater. So it's a neat story, and hope to see you soon when we continue our ramble down Main Street, and we'll look at a few more historic buildings that have neat stories to tell us.